And hello, and welcome to AleksConnects Creative Sandbox, making WWE Superstars art. My name is Alex, and today we still continuing to study CM Punk, or paint, or no, we're sculpting CM Punk, yeah. We're still continuing to sculpt CM Punk, because unfortunately, I didn't finish sculpt yet, because there was a lot of things to watch throughout this week, because as we know, which is the second thing that we're going to do. We're going to talk about WWE. A lot of things happened in WWE throughout the week. I mean, Hell in a Cell, Raw, SmackDown, Mixed Tag Challenge basically got back. 205 Live now translated into Wednesday, so apparently we're going to talk about 205 Live tomorrow, which is actually kind of weighted a little bit of weight in terms of the fact that I don't need to think about it like in first 2 days, but still it's not necessarily make things easier in terms of the WWE. I mean lately WWE creates so many content that is just basically crazy. You're not able to, I don't know, keep up with it, especially if you have like your own life besides WWE, which is usually people do. So, and you're not going to spend in WWE like 24/7. You kind of have to prioritize sometimes. So I barely managed to watch all shows. It was freaking crazy. So again, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, or what, today. So again, today we'll cover Hell in a Cell. We're also going to talk about the fact that I made certain predictions, and I guess we're actually going to start with this, and only then we're going to launch kind of the creative thing. So I guess the first thing that we will do, we actually going to talk about wrestling, about WWE at this point, because before I will continue to talk about like regular shows, Raw and SmackDown, and etc., we kind of need to cover Hell in a Cell because it was kind of crazy, yeah, kind of that. Oh snap! I forgot to post the thing. So live now. How could I forgot to post it? So wait a sec. I need to post the stream making WWE Superstar site. Continue to sculpt Sandbox portrait. Talking about WWE session 5. Yep. So tweet. Forgot to tweet the thing. Usually I'm tweeting the reminder and then I'm basically launching the stream, but today for some reason, super hectic day. I barely managed to sculpt CM Punk to a certain point, and it's still for me kinda crazy. So yeah, I guess without further ado, let's just do that. So again, I posted, so yeah, now there's a reminder. So yeah, so let's just start. Let's just make things right. Figure out if everything works. Check out the sound. I posted. Yep, sound works. Things are working. Pretty cool, I would say. Ugh. Yep, we live. 5th episode. Yeah, today is a pretty hectic day. But again, this is streams. This is not like some type of a pre-recorded episodes when you plan everything. This is the thing about life. I mean, even WWE makes a lot of mistakes live, so we're not professionals, so we're just streaming for fun, and yeah. So again, for those who basically just going to join us right now, hello and welcome back to AleksConnects Creative Sandbox, making WWE Superstars art, which is basically a thing where we are sculpting for now WWE Superstars. A little bit later we're going to paint them. And while doing so, we're talking about WWE. For now, unfortunately, since I'm still adjusting to sculpting and I'm still adjusting to painting, I'm going to basically make pre-recorded sessions that I sculpted in real time a couple of hours ago or throughout the week, and then I'm going to basically show them in basically real time as a recording while I'm going to talk about WWE. And usually we kind of starting the recording and then continuing to talk about WWE, but today it's a little bit different thing. Again, I'm still experimenting with the format, and one of the things that for me is still kind of unclear, what if we're going to work with Hell in a Cell and we need our predictions, for instance. So for instance, right now we actually need our predictions. So again, spoiler alert for those who didn't watch Hell in a Cell. So again, today is already Wednesday. I believe almost every person who wanted to watch Hell in a Cell already did so. So is the actual shows, but in case you don't know anything, again, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about a lot of spoilers today. So yeah, basically, let's just cover our my personal prediction that I made throughout the previous session, and basically talk about the Hell in a Cell itself. So Hell in a Cell basically was pretty awesome. I mean, the overall pay-per-view was pretty sick. I mean, there was kind of a weird couple of matches, but in most cases, all matches was pretty awesome. Dynamic of the show was pretty decent. The only thing that I basically feared the most, and I talked about it in the previous session, that Jeff Hardy and Randy Orton is going to be last that I would expect it to be. And it turns out the way that I thought so. And the reason for that, or behind that, is because they placed it as the beginning of the show, and of course the main Hell in a Cell event was Braun Strowman against Roman Reigns, which was for me kind of a downfall because, again, I knew that Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman not necessarily going to show that much craziness inside Hell in a Cell because they're too big, they're not necessarily that crazy athletic to work with Hell in a Cell. So again, the only thing that I would think about that Braun Strowman could do at that point is basically lift up the cage. But again, cage was red, and I don't believe that Braun Strowman works with red pretty well. It's unrelated reason, it doesn't matter, forget about it. So let's just go back to my prediction. So the first match apparently was a SmackDown Tag Team Championships, New Day versus Rusev Day, and my prediction was that New Day is going to win, and the prediction was pretty right. Again, if I'm going to make predictions, I'm not going to make them from the sake of just basically putting my money on something, like virtual not existing money on something, and win this prediction. No, for me, it's if I'm making certain type of prediction, this prediction it revolves around where the story could potentially go. So for me, one of the most interesting things in WWE is of course the story thing. Sometimes they telling us the deep stories. Sometimes these stories are kind of on the surface and they're not that interesting, and you can't basically extract depth from those stories. But sometimes if you will seek depth, you could actually find some depth in those stories. So and one of the things that I usually kind of aiming towards when I'm making predictions and when I'm going to make predictions, and if I'm going to talk about superstars eventually, I'm going to think about where this, for instance, like feud or the storyline could potentially go, where I would want it to go, what I don't like about the storyline, etc. So we'll try to focus more on the story element, because for me WWE it's a continuous story, although I like the sport aspect of it, but and I definitely respect all the craziness, the crazy amount of athleticism and skills that involved in WWE, but still for me the story element is most important, and because of this I'm not going to focus on matches that much, because again the only thing that I'm going to talk about matches is the psychology of the match. I mean the dynamic of the match, the timing, and like in general concepts. Yeah, let's just start. Again, Hell in a Cell was pretty cool. So eventually, kickoff started with SmackDown Tag Team Championships, New Day versus Rusev Day, and as I thought so, Rusev Day basically lost. And I actually like where it went, because I know that Rusev Day right now it's basically breaking down, and I guess it's apparent for everyone. And if you actually watched SmackDown, now you know what's happened. We're going to get back to that a little bit later. So, in terms of the SmackDown Tag Team Championship, I knew that New Day has to continue to hold the title. I definitely didn't saw Rusev and Aiden English with titles. It was pretty weird for me personally, because I don't see them as a team, although they're already as a team for a long period of time. Still, I'm not buying it. There's some type of, like, I don't know, the non-existent synergy between those, and that I don't necessarily like. They work pretty good as a, like, I don't know, as just pretty separate people that could talk with each other, but on the ring they definitely don't work. They don't mesh up in their styles. I don't believe that they basically complement each other in this area, and because of this, I definitely didn't saw Rusev Day as the championships, and I was kind of right. It was a good thing that New Day basically defended their championships. Match was pretty sick. I mean, people were crazy about it. It was pretty dynamic. It wasn't necessarily super mega storytelling based match. It was just basically a pure entertainment awesome match. So when you basically have like a lot of entertainment pieces, pretty decent timing, and pretty awesome wow moments, and which usually we seeing from New Day and from Usos when they're fighting each other. So the dynamic of the match, it was pretty close to that. So yeah, an overall match was pretty cool. Again, we're not going to talk about matches necessarily. We're going to talk about like how this match basically will continue to affect the storyline. And we're going to get back to it in a bit after we will cover all results. So again, when it comes down to then I not necessarily remember the exact order of the matches. I truly don't. I believe the next match was the actual match of the first match on pay-per-view. Probably was Jeff Hardy versus Randy Orton. Yep, basically the Hell in a Cell, open Hell in a Cell. And it was Jeff Hardy versus Randy Orton. I actually anticipated that match a lot, but unfortunately I didn't get anything that I wanted from it. It was awesome match, don't get me wrong. It was sick and twisted, but what I wanted for this is for Hardy to show his craziness more. And he didn't do that. I don't know why. Maybe because company didn't allow him to do so, and the only thing that he did is basically hang over the cell and I don't know, make weird gestures and just fell off the table. And it was kind of cool, but again, I would want it to be a little bit more crazy. So there was no swanton bomb, there was no nothing, so it was pretty weird. But overall, this match was pretty cool. I mean, it definitely added to the story and what happened with Randy Orton in the in the actual SmackDown, where he went in his psychology is basically freaks me out, and it is freaking sick. I definitely waiting to see what's next for Randy Orton. I definitely kind of want to see what's next for Jeff Hardy, because we didn't see him. We didn't even, like, I don't know, there wasn't, I don't remember any update about his condition, because he was straightened out the ring, and which was understandable. But again, respect to Jeff Hardy, respect to Randy Orton and his craziness. I love Randy Orton. I already said it multiple times. But one of the things that basically bothered me the most is I anticipated this match the most, and it kind of a little bit disappointed me in some areas. But again, I'm not like super judgy person. I will buy everything that WWE will produce almost. Of course, I will like something and I don't like something, but in most cases, I respect the work that goes into it. And because of this respect, as a creative person myself, I know how hard it is, and I know there's not every show and not every match is going to be perfect. And because of this, I completely understand this kind of an aspect, and I'm not going to be an a-hole about it. So yeah, continuing. So again, Randy Orton, and again, I knew that Randy Orton will win, and Randy Orton won for different reasons, because I thought that actually it will change Jeff Hardy, and maybe it will, because we don't know where this feud will continue or if it will continue. But for now, win for Randy Orton actually helped Jeff Hardy more than Randy Orton, and Randy Orton too, of course. It will elevate Randy Orton, and Randy Orton will help to push other less experienced superstars. So, which is, I believe, the thing that Randy Orton should do, as Cena is doing sometimes when he is back. So the next order of the matches I don't necessarily remember. Because of this, I'm going to basically go on a limb. I definitely remember most of the matches I predicted like throughout the Hell in a Cell, and I was like 100% right. And then I started to miss something. The first match that I missed was probably Alexa Bliss. I definitely wanted for Ronda Rousey to win. Then Samoa Joe. Yeah. But again, let's just go back from the bottom to the top. So in terms of the Dolph Ziggler and McIntyre, I was right. It was, by the way, there was a freaking sick match. I believe that this match actually stole the show, personally for me, because it was awesome dynamic. I was most excited about this match in terms of the who's going to win, I guess. It was also a match in terms of the dynamic. There was pretty decent storytelling, and overall this match was pretty cool. And I love the fact that the Dolph Ziggler and McIntyre basically defended their titles, which means that this feud will continue, as we thought so. In contrast to that, WWE Championship, the Universal Championship with Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman, turns out there was a particular winner. I mean, it was a draw, and because of a draw, you're not going to lose the title. Because of this, Roman Reigns basically so-called defended his title. That was weird. I mean, the fact that Drew McIntyre and Dolph Ziggler involved in the match, then the rest of the Shield was involved in the match, and then later, once Dolph Ziggler and Seth Rollins will basically jumped off the cage, of the middle portion of the cage, on tables, which wasn't depicted properly with cameramen. Sometimes they're lacking composition in terms of the shots, or they're missing something. We definitely missed how Ziggler landed. We definitely kind of somewhat missed how Seth Rollins was landed. It was too close. There was no white shout, and after that we didn't saw any repeats what happened and how they landed. That was pretty weird for me personally. So because right away after they landed, Brock Lesnar was entered the cage, basically kicked in the door, it was pretty crazy. It actually made more impact than Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler landing on the tables, on the commentator tables from the cage, which was weird. And then Brock Lesnar basically killed everyone on the ring, kinda, and that's it. So that was pretty sick ending, but at the same time, there was no definitive winner, which was kind of a bad thing. Talking about non-definitive winners, Samoa Joe. I actually don't believe that I missed Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe ideally won because AJ Styles basically tapped out, and everyone saw it, especially on replay. Besides the fact that AJ Styles tapped out and referee didn't saw it, we actually could see that Samoa Joe actually lifted his shoulder, the one. Basically the right one. I guess it was not important because the tap out was made before that, but again, judge didn't saw nor that. That was pretty disappointing, and for me, I was so bidding on a jaw that, like, I was disappointed. And when I saw how it actually happened, I was even more disappointed. But again, the feud continues. It's awesome. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. Becky Lynch and of course Charlotte. I was livid after Becky Lynch won the match. I mean, I was running back and forth in my room and kind of screaming because I love that Becky Lynch now on freaking top. She deserves it. She definitely had to do that a long time ago. I don't know why they didn't gave her this, and the only thing that like made this transformation is turning heel. I don't know, so I guess we're just happy for Becky, for those who are is a fan of Becky Lynch. So yeah, so good thing about that. Then we're going to continue about their feud later. Alexa Bliss, I actually thought that she's going to win. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and considering all conditions, considering the fact that there was a lot of outside interference, and even with this element with outside interference, Ronda Rousey still persevered and won, which for me is pretty weird. I don't get where exactly Alexa Bliss injured her arm. I believe the injury is not that big. I don't believe the injury was necessarily super serious, probably a micro injury, because they removed her from Mixed Tag Challenge with Braun Strowman, but still, I believe they will get her back during the Mixed Tag Team Challenge because it's going to be longer than the previous one. But again, I was pretty disappointed that Ronda Rousey won. I already said about the I don't have anything against Ronda Rousey, but the thing is, I still would want for Alexa Bliss to hold the title, because that way the women's division is going to be pushed a little bit better, because again, Ronda Rousey is freaking Terminator. It's pretty hard to basically not only compete with her but win, because she's that overpushed. But at the same time, the cool thing is that she actually will try to go with open challenges each Raw, and if this actually will happen, it will give more kind of push to the women's division, I believe, which is a good thing. I don't know. There's a good thing about it, and at the same time, it's a bad thing. But again, missed that. Wanted for Alexa Bliss to win. Yeah, we talked about Randy Orton, we talked about that, and the last match that we're going to talk about in terms of the result is, of course, Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella against Miz and Maurice. It was a weird match. I mean, I actually wanted this match, like, I wanted for this match to happen for such a long period of time, but for some reason it didn't click. I don't know why. And don't get me wrong, everything was kind of right, but something was missing. There was some type of I don't know, these like missing link in this match that basically didn't happen for me. But overall match was decent, and feud will continue, which is a good thing. So yeah, and this is it. Yeah, we kind of covered Braun Strowman. We covered yeah. So basically, Braun Strowman didn't won. Samoa Joe didn't won. Becky Lynch won. Alexa Bliss didn't won. Randy Orton won. The Miz and Maurice won, which was a good thing, because this is the only thing, like the only good part about this match was the fact that I guessed right. Because I believe that if Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella would win, this feud wouldn't continued, or without that much of an extent. But the cool thing is now it's going to be just one-on-one. Daniel Bryan with Miz, which is exactly the thing that I want to watch the most, because the animosity between those, it's crazy, and when you add their wives to the mix, it just basically kind of misses the point for them to fight, because now they're fighting to defend their wives and not to defend their honor or whatever, so it's kind of a little bit different dynamic, but still cool. And also got over Drew McIntyre again. I was happy for them. And New Day, for me, it was no other choice, basically. I definitely knew that was they not going to win. So yeah, getting back to what happened. So we're probably going to start with Raw as usual. So let's just put our main storylines and discuss them. So Braun Strowman on Raw, yeah, Simone Jones SmackDown. So let's just go and place the things from SmackDown a little bit down. Dolph Ziggler in here. Becky Lynch on SmackDown. Miz and Reed on SmackDown. Randy Orton on SmackDown. Seriously? There's so many matches from SmackDown. Randy Orton, Samoa Joe, Becky Lynch, New Day. Yeah, so basically, we're going to talk about these three first. So in terms of the what this thing will continue to go. By the way, right now I probably could launch the actual recording because we don't need that anymore. So again, we're going to talk about Braun Strowman direction, Roman Reigns direction, Dolph Ziggler direction, McIntyre direction, Alexa Bliss and Ronda Rousey direction, and everything that basically surrounds them. Then we're going to talk about the rest of the things that happen on Raw, and then we will go into the SmackDown and briefly talk about Mixed Tag Team Challenge, which basically was not necessarily had that much of a stories in them, but it was pretty cool still. So again, the cool thing is that now we don't have to talk about that much now, I mean, which is cool. So yeah, so I will continue to talk about the things, and I'm going to launch a video of the process where I continue to sculpt CM Punk. So what are you going to see right now is basically me sculpting CM Punk. I actually managed to do this today. I sculpted a little bit, like about 20 minutes in the morning with distractions, so there's going to be some freezes in here. And before starting the stream, I sculpted for an hour. So basically for 1.5 hours almost, like approximately, I sculpted the thing that you're going to see at the end. In most cases, as I said before, I tried to work on an anatomy. So we basically added every part of the anatomy beforehand in the previous stream, and then we basically and throughout today's session, you're going to see in real time how I sculpted basic anatomy. So we started to sculpt basically facial parts of the anatomy, facial anatomy, and for me it was actually the first experience when I did this exactly that way. It was pretty awesome, and it was not that hard as actually. So again, I'm going to talk about it in the end of the session, what I did, what problems I had throughout this creative process. But for now, let's just launch it, let it run in full time. Let's just check if it's actually in full time or not. Okay, we don't need delay. Wait a sec, I need to kind of check some things. Yep, normal speed is 1. So basically right now I'm kind of showing what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this scheme to basically work with anatomy. This is a skill that I developed throughout the years that basically simplifies for me personally anatomy, which makes me understand it a little bit better. And I'm going to basically use this and other references from the anatomy that are going to be on a different part of the screen, and I'm going to sculpt that. So yeah, while the sculpt is happening, let's just continue to talk about the actual shows. So in terms of the shows, basically, let's just take our notes. So in terms of the shows, there is a lot of things happen. So the first thing is, of course, the Super Showdown is coming soon, and they're already preparing a lot of things to basically get to the Super Showdown. They already established multiple matches. We're going to talk about those matches a little bit later. Yeah. So one of the things that basically happened on Raw was I'm going to talk about probably first about the main topics, which basically the results, the continuation of Hell in a Cell results, and then we're going to discuss everything that not necessarily relates to that. So the first thing, of course, is Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns feud. So now, since this feud is not one-directional, so now we have a third component of it, which is Brock Lesnar. And because there was a lot of interference, what we're seeing right now in this feud, it's pretty interesting. But again, I believe this feud is kind of not necessarily super important at this point, because it's just going to it's just going to be established for the sake of going into Super Showdown. It's not necessarily going to be a main feud. I'm still waiting for this feud to become a little bit more, I don't know, concentrated on something bigger than just leading up to the shows. And for me personally, for now, the reason why it's weird for me, because I'm still thinking like the only reason why they're creating those feuds is to, and those storylines, is to basically lead up to the show and make sure show relevant, because they need to push these shows in Australia, the new show, which is going to be called Crown Jewels. They're going to be back in Saudi Arabia. So because they're creating a lot of like not necessarily planned shows that are there to establish the influence of the WWE, they're not necessarily focusing on creating good storylines and proper storylines, but just like, I don't know, creating a big buzz around certain storylines. And I'm not necessarily feeling like this is a good storytelling. It's still efficient storytelling, because they still producing some type of content and it works. Audience buying it. Most of the audience, I believe, buying it. But in most cases, it still lacks something. It still lacks depth. It still lacks the reasons. But one of the things that I like about this feud is the fact that Shield is definitely right now on top, and although Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins didn't win anything, which was a good thing, I believe, and the only one from the Shield retained the title was, of course, Roman Reigns. It still doesn't change the fact that Shield is on top, and they definitely want to establish that. And as long as they will continue to fight for dominance, 3-on-3, which I mean the Shield against the Dogs of War with Braun Strowman. I believe he actually called them before like this, if I remember properly. Yeah, Dogs of War and Hounds of Justice. So this feud is kind of deep and pretty cool, although it still not necessarily works on much more deeper level. They don't necessarily talking about this deep stuff on the microphone. The only thing that they're doing is just kind of interfering in each other's matches, helping each other, and that's it. It kind of, I don't know, the action-based feud less than a promo-based feud, and this is probably one of the reasons why I'm not necessarily 100% happy about it, but still, it's still good, it still works. What else? So again, I don't know actually what to talk about the promos, like the Braun Strowman Roman Reigns thing. I watched the show, like the Raw, and most of the things I already forgot because, I don't know, it was weird. Matches was placed pretty weird, and although usually I'm waiting the show after the pay-per-view the most, because it's usually pretty decent, this show was kind of a weird. The fact that Roman Reigns started the match, the fact that Roman Reigns kind of talked about stuff, then I actually don't remember what happened. I truly forgot what happened. Maybe because I watched everything today, unfortunately. My brain can't hold that much of an information from all shows, and half of it I basically forgot, so whatever, it's not important. We're not going to try to cover everything again. It would be awesome if we had some type of audience for us to basically help us to remember that, but again, since we don't have anyone yet, we will basically skip those topics and that's it, and we will remember them once these topics will start to make sense. Because for me, if feud not necessarily progresses and don't make sense, I'm not necessarily paying attention to it. And it kind of progressed, but again, as I said before, the only reason for progression of this feud was to make the match of Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns versus Strowman on Super Showdown. Oh no, not on Super Showdown, but actually on Crown Jewels. And because of this, because again they used this feud to create a leading up to the next show. I don't necessarily like when they're doing this because it's basically a main attraction at this point that will force people in Saudi Arabia to buy tickets at this point. They needed something big and they created something big. They didn't necessarily focus on why they need to fight and whatever. It was kind of, okay, they're going to fight, it's cool. Let's continue to the next one. It was a lot of free matches, which was pretty cool. Actually kind of forgot what type of free matches we had. Again, you can't pay attention to everything these days. Okay, let's think what I have here. Yeah, Baron Corbin made a pretty interesting decisions by putting himself against Roman Reigns in the main event for the title. That was pretty weird. I mean, he tried to control the whole show by making things weird. He promised Dolph Ziggler that he's going to fight from Seth Rollins, and if Seth Rollins is not going to show, and then he's going to give him title for just like that. The first match was, oh yeah, I'm starting to remember. Dean Ambrose fought. Yeah, basically it was a lot of single rematches from the things that happened on Hell in a Cell. So we saw Dolph Ziggler fight Seth Rollins for the title. Seth Rollins, of course, defended it. We saw McIntyre fought against Dean Ambrose. It was at the beginning. It was, by the way, a pretty decent match. Again, I believe Drew McIntyre won with Claymore when Dean Ambrose barely got to the ring. That was pretty cool. So again, the overall show was pretty decent, but again, because I had like Hell in a Cell, then Raw, then SmackDown right away, watch in a bench watch almost, for me, most of the things I kind of already forgot. This is probably the problem of the bench watching. You're not necessarily paying attention to all details, and you need to have time to remember them. So, what else? So yeah, the Baron Corbin thing was pretty fun. I mean, it was definitely funny, the fact what he did. One thing that was funny too is the fact that when Paul Heyman entered the ring at the beginning of the show to basically defend his client, or like say that his client is basically did what he did and why he did it and what was the reason, he entered the ring with the door that Brock Lesnar basically kicked in. That was weird. I was definitely laughing about that. He didn't necessarily carry it himself, but he got help, but still, that was weird. What else? Champions. So, yeah, as I said before, Alexa injured herself apparently. Because of this, she got removed from Braun Strowman's tag team Little Big in Mixed Tag Team Challenge. It was replaced by Ember Moon. We're going to get to the Mixed Tag Team Challenge later. So, what else was pretty cool? No, seriously. What else? Rollins versus Ziggler fought. McIntyre versus Ambrose fought. Corbin versus Roman Reigns for title fought. Nia Jax returned. She basically fought with Ember Moon versus Mickie James and Alicia Fox. That was pretty cool. People definitely liked that. Elias, when he tried to do his part, Lio Rush distracted him, and apparently, as we planned before, Lio Rush is actually going to be a manager of Bobby Lashley, which is awesome, and he actually showed himself pretty well. I mean, again, he's kind of annoying when he's talking, but his annoyance is it's actually working for him, which is pretty cool. So I'm basically happy for Lio Rush, and he's going to create a pretty interesting dynamic with whomever Bobby Lashley is going to feud, which is pretty cool because, again, for me, Lio Rush actually makes Bobby Lashley a little bit more interesting because, again, we already talked about it, that Bobby Lashley didn't necessarily bad on microphone. He's just, you can't take him seriously. He's pretty, I don't know, he looked like a baby. He definitely looks like a baby face, and you can't necessarily take him seriously when he's joking. He looks too cute. It's weird. And when he talks seriously, the same effect. And Lio Rush basically helps probably to balance this element. And I believe it's a good idea to put Lio Rush with Bobby Lashley. They definitely create a pretty interesting dynamic, especially like after then Bobby Lashley entered and fought with Elias. Bobby Lashley tried to lift Lio Rush, and it was pretty weird. It's like he wanted to make some type of a weird move on him, and I don't know. That was weird, but that was funny. You know, we're not going to talk about that again. I will try to provide in those streams, review streams, less water and more like actual content. But again, at the same time, again, for now, since I'm just talking and something is happening right now out there, I could talk about everything that I want, I guess, but later we're going to focus on something that basically actually important. But again, for me, like the small stories are usually important. I'm not disregarding usually even small stuff, because they might work, they might basically have some reason a little bit later. What else? We had that's it? So you tell me it was everything that happened? Yeah, actually SmackDown was bigger in events than Raw for some reason. I don't have any notes from Raw, but I have a lot of notes from SmackDown. So yeah, Lio Rush, manager, Bobby Lashley, because apparently it was just a lot of rematches. I like SmackDown more. Again, usually I like SmackDown more than Raw because Raw is big and it doesn't necessarily provide that big of a content. I mean, it creates a lot of big matches, a lot of like waste of time during the 3-hour show, and because of this, it's not necessarily has a lot of things. And SmackDown, although has small, like not that many things, but it's still sometimes much more interesting because you have so little time that you need to fit everything in 2 hours, and it's much harder. And yeah, yeah, this is kind of it. I mean, I have nothing. If I will remember something, I will talk about it, because again, we talked about Braun Strowman, Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre. There's not that many separate storylines on Raw right at this point. We have like big storyline that involves like 6 members, or 3 members of the Shield and 3 members of basically Braun Strowman and McIntyre and Ziggler. From women's division, we seen only 3-on-3 Natalya, usually we see Natalya, Ronda Rousey, Alexa Bliss, right now Nia Jax got back, Ember Moon, so we've seen those in tag teams that not necessarily adding to the story necessarily, so because of this, it's kind of weird. So maybe they will focus a little bit more on storylines once we will get to the Evolution. Because right now they're not necessarily paying attention to those. They're putting all money on promoting their big shows such as Super Showdown and the show in Saudi Arabia, the Crown Jewels, the weirdest name ever. So yeah, I guess this is kind of it. I mean, oh no, Riot Squad and Bellas, that was kind of a weird thing. And basically, Riot Squad and Bellas with Ronda Rousey is going to fight on Super Showdown. And also Taker and Triple H, of course, is going to fight on Super Showdown. By the way, Taker entered and talked a lot about Triple H. It was kind of an empty talk. It didn't necessarily meant anything. Audience was pretty weirdly like reacting to the Undertaker and his promo. The promo was, I believe, relatively weak. I don't know, it was kind of slow, it's like Undertaker didn't know what to say, and he made up everything on a go, and it was kind of apparent that it might be the case. So it was weird. I don't know. There was no answer from the Triple H. Undertaker just like disappeared, and that's it. I don't like these type of one-directional promos. Remember the word. I don't like these type of one-directional promos. They don't necessarily like work when you when 1 week one basically speaks, the other week the other speaks in the answer to the previous one. Come on, talk to each other directly, or at least like show up on a Titantron and interact somehow. I don't know. When I don't see this interaction, for me it's super weird. And I guess for wrestlers it's not a good thing too, when you don't have your opponent and you just duck into no one. It doesn't create depth in basically promos usually. So yeah, because we need feedback. Like even for me right now, talking to nowhere, it's definitely works less good that it would probably work if we had someone to talk to. Again, one directional speaking not necessarily has this element of specialness. What? This is the word? Yeah. So let's make it a word. So yeah, oh yeah, the only thing that Taker said after his long speech is the fact that Kane is going to be in a corner of the Taker, so is Shawn Michaels is going to be in a corner of Triple H, which is pretty cool. I mean, the Brothers of Destruction versus the DX, it definitely makes this show pushed more and more and more in terms of the main attraction, which is the whole idea, I believe. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So yeah, continuing. I guess this is it when it comes down to Raw. Maybe I will remember things about Raw again. Yeah, talking about Ballas again. So Total Divas is going to start on Wednesday. Maybe if I will manage to watch it somehow. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. But again, since I will cover everything that I watch usually, we're going to talk about that too. But again, probably towards the end, after we'll talk about 205 Live, NXT, and what else is going to be there? And Mae Young Classic. Yeah, I believe we're going to talk about this after Mae Young Classic. So, or I don't know, it doesn't matter. See tomorrow. See tomorrow what it's going to be. What else we had? So, yeah, let's just finish with Raw. I don't believe that Raw has a lot of things to talk about because, again, we have like big, crazy feuds. About Ronda Rousey, we could talk about the fact that Ronda Rousey basically tried to create an open challenge. Natalya kind of, I believe, tried to answer this challenge, but Ruby Riott and Riott Squad basically drag her out of the backstage area. Then fight happened, and this is it. Oh no, Ruby Riott basically fought against Ronda Rousey. Yep, for the title. That was pretty cool. And that's it. And it resolved, and yeah. Yep. Continuing. Elias as always is awesome. I mean, what he talked about when Lio Rush interrupted him was pretty awesome. I mean, he actually thought that this is a kid. Of course, it was a joke, but still, it was pretty funny to perceive Lio Rush as just a kid who basically lost his parents. That was actually fun. I mean, the whole dynamic of Lio Rush versus Elias was pretty interesting. That was awesome. Lio Rush is definitely pretty good at microphone. I mean, he's confident. He definitely knows how to kind of go with the flow and react to things. Sometimes he's reacting, but again, he can do that. So yeah, continuing. So let's just go to the SmackDown. So when it comes down to the SmackDown, again, one of the things that kind of bothered me right away is the fact that basically now after SmackDown there's not going to be 205 Live. Apparently now 205 Live, so is NXT is going to be pre-recorded. And I kind of know already the results of the 205 Live, because when I tried to figure out what's happened with 205 Live, okay, this is the second video. Yep, this is the second video. First one was finished at that note. So yeah, this video is going to be for an hour, and I'm going to do the main things throughout this video in most cases. I actually did a lot of things through this video. I didn't thought that I will manage to go in 1 hour and do the things that I did throughout this hour. It was pretty inspiring personally for me. Like, sometimes you will inspire yourself. It happens sometimes. So let's just go talk about SmackDown. Again, we managed to cover Raw in an hour, less than an hour, and Hell in a Cell. It's time to talk about SmackDown, because there's a lot of things to talk about SmackDown. So again, one thing that's right away changed is the fact that now Wednesday is going to have a different lineup. So now on Tuesdays we're going to have SmackDown, and after SmackDown we're going to have a mixed tag team challenge, which is the things that we're going to talk about now. And of course Total Divas is going to start on Wednesdays. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Wednesday lineup now is going to be, as I said, Total Divas for now. Wednesday are going to be Mae Young Classic, NXT, and 205 Live, which is pretty crazy. And there's a lot of events in here. Yeah. Yeah, talking about Super Showdown, let's just quickly talk about the matches on the Super Showdown. So again, for now we know that Super Showdown is going to have Riot Squad versus Bellas and Ronda Rousey, so basically 3-on-3. Taker versus Triple H, when basically Brothers of Destruction kinda versus DX, because Kane and Shawn Michaels are going to be in the corners of Triple H and Taker, at least present. AleksConnects versus Asuka and Naomi, which is the weirdest match ever, but again, they have to put AleksConnects on the show in Australia because they're from Australia, so it's pretty clear why they put them against Asuka and Naomi. They actually tried to feud on this show, on the SmackDown. We didn't saw AleksConnects in the previous show, but we finally saw AleksConnects on the SmackDown. They kind of talked about things. They talked about the weird dynamic between Asuka and Naomi. Again, tried to mock them. It was unsuccessful. Again, we'll see where it's going to continue. What else happened on SmackDown? So again, another established matches for Super Showdown is New Day versus The Bar. Again, I don't necessarily like The Bar at this point. By the way, match Cesaro versus, I believe, Kofi Kingston was pretty awesome, because I missed seeing Cesaro fighting in a single matches. For me personally, I'm definitely waiting for Cesaro to fight more in the single matches, because when Cesaro fights as a tag team, in a tag team with Sheamus, it doesn't work for me personally. I want something a little bit more, I don't know, I want to see Cesaro in a singles competition basically. And when I'm seeing Cesaro fight against with Sheamus against different tag teams, just for me it doesn't work. So for me personally, this match I'm not anticipating it at all. So then we have Daniel Bryan versus The Miz for #1 contendership. At the beginning I actually thought that there was a joke, but apparently it's actually official that Daniel Bryan is going to fight Miz, and the winner is going to face the WWE Championship, which is a cool thing, because if Daniel Bryan will win, it will mean that Daniel Bryan potentially could fight against Styles or Joe, regardless of against who's going to fight. It's going to be an awesome match, I believe. And hopefully Daniel Bryan will win his title the way that I want for Daniel Bryan to win the title. I already talked about it before. I want for Daniel Bryan to win the title the regular way, not necessarily to fight against the 30 as he won his first titles, but actually win it because he can, because he's talented, because he's able to do a lot of things, and etc. And I believe that right now is the actual time to do so, considering the fact that he's on a SmackDown. So we're not going to talk about predictions, but I definitely rooting for Daniel to win in this particular case. Yeah, Maurice leaves she gets back to her motherhood, apparently. I don't know if it was actually a kind of a feud and just a storyline, but I believe that she actually going to leave and not going to appear that much. Um, yeah, I believe the same goes for Brie Bella, maybe. I don't know. It's weird that Maurice is basically leaving before Evolution pay-per-view. Maybe she will get back, or maybe she will fight like one time only in this pay-per-view in some type of mixed match against multiple women's. I don't know. We don't know women. So yeah. Yeah, I already talked about the fact that I'm missing Cesaro as a single competitor. Definitely that. Definitely missing it. And I figured out that during the match with him with Kofi Kingston, I believe he actually thought with Kofi Kingston is like, if I'm not, yeah, probably he did. That was a pretty cool match. So Aiden, oh yeah, the whole storyline that involves right now Aiden English, like basically venting on some weird guy, and while doing so, he trashed, basically blamed Delana in the fact that she is the reason why Rusev is losing constantly. She wanted to say this to Rusev, she wasn't able to do so. Then match happened when Rusev basically fought, who? He fought actually against Shinsuke Nakamura for the title, and then he lost because of the Aiden English, and in the end of the match, Aiden English actually attacked Rusev before Lana was able to tell Rusev what Aiden English said about her. So it was pretty weird. I mean, I kind of happy about like what's going to happen potentially with this feud, because I definitely would better look at Aiden English fight Rusev rather than look at Aiden English in tag team with Rusev, because again, I actually kind of digging Aiden English as a heel more than as some weird face. So because of this, I believe he's definitely needs to go back to the old vaudevillain mentality of the bad guy, and hopefully will create a pretty interesting feud against Rusev. And of course, Lana is going to be involved there too, which is pretty cool. So Randy Orton basically got to the new craziness. He went to the production truck and psychologically pressed on a guy in a production truck who basically works with putting footage on the screen. That was pretty threatening. I mean, it was actually kind of scary. I mean, how Randy Orton showed himself, the level of intimidation, the level of craziness is his voice is in his eyes. Again, I love Randy Orton, almost everything that he does, but that was basically another level, and that was pretty cool. And what he revealed, that he was done with Jeff Hardy, and now he needs to find another victim, which for me personally is freaking sick. I still believe that while he's going to try to find another victim, Jeff Hardy might get back transformed from Enigma to a brother Nero. It's kind of will, and their feud will potentially will continue. Hopefully, because I don't believe that there's any people and any superstars that right now Randy Orton could basically go against, except Jeff Hardy. Although again, as I said before, it would be pretty decent, like pretty cool if Randy Orton would actually try to fight against someone and try to and help to push this someone. Yeah, we didn't saw Carmella, we didn't saw R-Truth, we saw them a little bit later on a mixed tag team championship challenge. What else? AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe. Controversy continues. Now they're going to fight on the Super Showdown in a no disqualification match, which is definitely going to be an interesting one. Definitely waiting for that, where this thing will progress. Again, I still believe that Styles shouldn't won the title, and we actually kind of, it would be better if Joe would win the title. But again, company has different opinion on that again. I guess they have a plan, hopefully. mm, what else? Yeah, we talked about Rusev, Shinsuke. Almas and Styles again showed us a freaking classic. It was not necessarily a long match, but again, it was a pretty decent and cool match. After which, Joe again attacked Styles. By the way, cool thing about match of the Almas and Styles was how it ended. Styles basically made a jackknife Styles Clash reverse win. That was freaking sick. I mean, it was actually kind of started as a jackknife, and then he somehow kind of reversed it into the Styles Clash and basically won the match. That was freaking sick, and the match itself was awesome. Again, as I said before, Andrade Cien Almas is freaking awesome, especially with the Styles. They definitely will create a lot of classics together, and I believe, like, doesn't matter against who you're going to put Andrade Cien Almas, he definitely will show a lot of unique matches, because he's definitely capable of storytelling. He's pretty capable on the ring in terms of the moves and etc. skills and whatever. So yeah, we actually almost finished to talk about SmackDown, which is weird. It's kind of, I know, we have for like an hour and we almost stopped to, like, we almost covered everything involving wrestling, which is weird. I guess we need to go back and talk about multiple stuff. Oh, this is the first time. I probably shouldn't talk about those things too fast. I rushed in too much, and right now we run out things to talk about. But again, one of the reasons why I'm rushing into talking about those things, because I don't want to forget them, because I know if I will continue to talk about one specific theme for a longer period of time, I'm not going to be able to basically remember the other thing that I would probably wanted to talk about. Again, even after we will stop like talking about wrestling, we still could continue to talk about like the progress. I could basically explain you what I'm doing and whatever. I guess this is, yeah, because again, I don't want to forget that this is not a stream about WWE. It's a stream that focuses on a WWE topic, but in most cases this is a stream about creative. And the only reason why right now I'm not necessarily working live, because I still need to get some experience in this. Once I will get comfortable and will gain some confidence in what I'm doing with sculpting, then we will 100% is going to just sculpt and briefly talk about WWE, and then streams will become a little bit more creative oriented and less WWE oriented. And they still will have a lot of like WWE elements, especially like in terms of the discussion. But in most cases, again, the creative will actually happen, and we will talk about creative stuff too. Okay, so wait a sec, I need to quick check. We'll talk about creative stuff too. Things are working. Hopefully things are not lagging. They don't supposed to lag. They're kind of lagging for me personally out there, but the reason why it happens because I have a pretty weak graphic card. It's not necessarily working good with the visuals, and yeah. So yeah, continue. So yeah, the fact that Becky Lynch is going to basically fight against Charlotte again. The whole dynamic of the show was pretty interesting in terms of the Becky Lynch and Charlotte. Becky Lynch basically decided to throw a coronation, official coronation. Paige basically gave her the title. She talked about some stuff, basically wanted for Charlotte to come. Charlotte came, and they kind of went through pretty decent and pretty awesome conversation when Becky Lynch basically pressed on her buttons. They started to fight, and basically it was decided that they're going to fight on Super Showdown. But what the RM means? Oh, rematch. So yeah, it's just going to be a rematch of the match that we already saw, which was a pretty awesome match. I guess this is kind of it. I mean, nothing happened. So let's just go into the mixed tag challenge then. Again, the next thing was mixed tag challenge. So again, we saw Ember Moon replaced. So wait a minute. We saw that Ember Moon replaced Alexa Bliss, and she fought with Braun Strowman against Kevin Owens and Natty, which was actually a pretty awesome match. I mean, it was pretty funny. Like the dynamic between Ember Moon and Braun Strowman was kind of weird because again they're just paired up together, but it still worked. And Natty and Kevin Owens, as usual. What Kevin Owens, like one of the things that I like about Kevin Owens the most is the fact that he's constantly talking during the match. And the thing about the previous mixed tag team challenge and this tag team challenge and mixed tag team challenge is in the entertainment. And because of this, they're not necessarily creating an awesome matches. They're creating an awesome stories inside the ring. And this is something that some people are doing pretty decently, some people not. So for instance, the second match, which was AJ and Charlotte versus Naomi and Jey Uso. Like I loved everything that AJ did, Charlotte did, and Jey Uso did, but Naomi didn't necessarily told the story on the ring. I mean, she wasn't kind of buying into this as I don't know, entertaining element. She was too serious and too focused on the actual match and on winning. When for other participants, they actually had a lot of fun, and because of this, the audience had fun too. And in general, that was actually an awesome matches. Again, Ember Moon and Braun Strowman won, and Owens and Natty lost. AJ and Charlotte won, and Naomi and Jey Uso lost. It doesn't mean that they're eliminated, because apparently this mixed tag team challenge is going to be a little bit different from the previous one. Previous one, once you will lose, you will get eliminated, and then you might get a second chance in a wild card with the audience's votes. But right here, the structure of the mixed tag challenge is a little bit different. Apparently they're going to fight multiple types of matches. It's going to be probably multiple rounds. We don't necessarily, they didn't necessarily establish those rounds, and we're not going to talk about those. But again, the only thing that we know now that Ember and Braun now have a win. So is AJ Styles and Charlotte. So apparently it's going to be like, I don't know, maybe each of these will fight 3 matches, and those who have more wins will continue to the next round and will fight those who have the most wins, I believe. So again, we don't know the structure, or at least I don't know the structure, and we're not going to focus on that much, because again, I'm not going to see mixed tag team challenge as something that will actually help, like as something like Mayhem Classic, or something like, for instance, like Cruiserweight Tournament, or UK champion, like United Kingdom Championship Classic, or whatever, like some type of tournaments. This is not necessarily a tournament, because the reason for this tournament is not necessarily push existing superstars, but instead to basically entertain the audience and create a pretty interesting kind of dynamic. And this is the way that I'm looking at the mixed tag team championship, is to basically experience unique pairings, male and female pairings, experience interesting storytelling inside those pairings, because again, I definitely remember a awesome dynamic of Charlotte and Bobby Roode in the previous one, awesome dynamic Miz and Asuka, and they got back in here, and they will continue to basically show this awesome dynamic. And by the way, previous year Asuka win, Asuka, I mean the Miz and Asuka team won, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I guess again, Ember and Braun showed a pretty interesting kind of dynamic, but I actually liked the AJ Styles and Charlotte match versus Naomi and Jay more, because Jay showed himself pretty awesome. He's definitely an awesome actor. He kind of showed himself pretty cool. Naomi again is the only one who didn't necessarily good in acting, and she didn't necessarily tried to to act. She just basically was too focused on the match itself. But again, she definitely kind of worked in this kind of dynamic still. But again, she was definitely lacking from all of those three, because AJ, Charlotte, and Jay was definitely having fun, and this it was definitely showing. With Naomi, it wasn't the case. She was too serious and didn't necessarily answer to those kind of things. She tried, but it wasn't. It was forceful. And again, everything. If something is forceful, if you see like something is basically getting forced, you're not going to be able to necessarily work with it. So yeah, I guess this kind of covers our WWE thing. Again, usually we could talk about like what's happening right now on the 205 Live. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. The only thing that I will say about 205 Live is the fact that probably, as I heard, and considering the fact that now WWE actually removed Neville from the actual 205 roster and put them on alumni, it like I heard the rumors that Neville is basically got released finally by WWE, and it's probably the case right now, because again, there's still, I didn't saw still like the official kind of things that he actually was released, but if he did, now I believe it's actually pretty close to the truth, because they got they removed him from the 205 roster, and because before that he was present in the 205 roster. Right now he basically got placed in an alumni roster, and because of this, not necessarily roster, but yeah, in an under alumni category, and because of this, it kind of makes things disappointing personally for me, because I wanted for Neville to stay in WWE, because yes, he went through the ref patch when he feuded against Enzo Amore at that time, and this is one of the things that kind of disappointed him and make him angry and bitter and whatever. And still, I believe he's pretty kind of not necessarily I wouldn't say that he's not a decent person, but I saw like multiple interactions of Neville outside of the ring, like on different shows, not in real shows, but on recordings of like different type of shows that WWE produced throughout the years. And for me, it kind of appeared that Neville is actually a pretty serious guy. He don't like jokes. He actually kind of just a hard-working guy that basically, I don't know, has his own mindset. And because of this, he's not necessarily probably that well with certain type of things. And if he don't like something, you're not going to basically put up with it. And maybe this was one of the reasons why this thing happened. So again, we're not going to talk about that. I wish we had someone to talk about this with, but since we don't, it's kind of just one directional conversation. Don't see the reason at this point. I will better leave those topics when we're actually going to have some audience, and this audience will be interested in that. We might not get any audience at any at all, and I still will continue to stream, and I still will continue to talk about WWE, because for me personally, it's a good way to vent, good way to talk about stuff that I like, and why not? And I'm still creating content that later I will be used for different purposes. So I'm studying. While I'm studying, I'm doing things. I'm practicing English. I'm talking about the favorite topic, one of my favorite topics. Why not? So, and considering the fact that we're going to cover a lot of creative stuff too, besides WWE, the more we will progress this, it might be helpful for the creative people who actually want to go into sculpting or painting, which we will start at some point too. So yeah, I guess this kind of sums up the things that I want to talk about WWE. I'm going to go quickly through the WWE roster on a different screen to basically think, like, to see if I actually didn't miss anything or not. So again, the next pay-per-view is going to be Super Showdown, October 6th. Then there's going to be an Evolution, October 28th. Then there's going to be a November 2nd, as they revealed a Crown Jewels in Saudi Arabia, and then we're going to have a Survivor Series, and only then TLC. And as they said, they probably, yeah, that's kind of it. November 3rd, or December. No, November 2nd. Okay. So yeah, I will quickly go through the roster on the second monitor, and while going through the roster, I just want to make sure that I talked about everyone. Oh yeah, Bailey, Sasha, I didn't talk about those. They probably paired together and fought, but I don't remember what exactly transpired. Again, their feud right now kind of weird. Again, they're feuding against Alicia Fox probably, and or not. Okay, we need to think. Look at the previous week. Oh yeah, Dana Brooke, by the way, fought against probably either Sasha or Bailey, maybe. By the way, I believe one of the reasons why Dana Brooke is now kind of fighting, actually, and not just being a manager. Again, we remember that a couple of weeks ago she quit Titus Worldwide, and she kind of trying to get back on a singles competition. And one of the reasons why this happens, I believe, because as I properly understand, she's pretty good friend with Baron Corbin. They're actually pretty good friends, and because they're pretty good friends, I guess Baron Corbin, the manager, and he kind of allows her to give her a little bit more time, and if he actually has some type of deciding factor in who's going to fight who. There's still a big rumor, I don't know if it's a rumor or not, I'm not 100%, that Matt Hardy is actually injured permanently. He's not going to go back anytime at all. It's not a good thing. That means that Bray Wyatt is basically not going to go back anytime soon, or they have to establish a completely different time thing for him. Yeah, by the way, we saw Outers of Pain that's on Raw, that basically they again kind of intimidated the outside things, like the people outside backstage, and also fought against another tag team and destroyed them again. We also saw a pretty interesting beginning of the Connor and Victor versus someone. Let me remember who exactly that was. They started to feud against someone, but I don't remember against who exactly. I remember Victor fought against someone. Oh, yeah, I remember. Our new tag team, Bobby Roode and Chad Gable. Yep. So I actually need to place Bobby Roode and Chad Gable into one category as a tag team. This is the reason why I missed him, because I don't see him as a tag team at this point for some reason. But they actually, officially, I believe, are going to be a tag team. So yeah, Bobby Roode and Chad Gable are now going to probably feud against the Ascension, which is actually a pretty good thing, I believe, because ideally they need to help Ascension to get on top, because Ascension was on top for a lot of years in NXT, and since they get basically into the main roster, they basically irrelevant, which is a bad thing for them. And I would want for them to, of course, grow and become better, because they definitely have potential, and they're not becoming younger, and it would be awesome to see where they're going to go. Who else? I don't remember Finn Balor at all. Jinder Mahal is going to fight with Alicia Fox in a pretty weird and crazy tag team in a mixed tag team challenge, which is going to be pretty interesting. We didn't saw Mojo Rawley. We didn't saw neither of those guys. Okay, we saw Dana Brooke fight. Nia Jax got back. We saw Elias. Yep, we covered most of the roster, by the way, which is pretty cool. Yeah, another thing, by the way, Cena is going to fight with Bobby Lashley on the Super Showdown against someone. I forgot who they're going to fight against. But actually, yeah, Cena is going to be on the Super Showdown. And fighting with Bobby Lashley against, probably Elias, because, yeah, against Elias, someone else. Yeah, we're going to cover that once time will come. Yeah, definitely don't remember what happens with who Sasha Banks and Bailey fought. I remember they entered the ring. Oh no, they didn't fight. Yeah, they didn't fight. They just probably entered the ring with the kids from the Connor's Cure. Yep. So yeah, they didn't fight. So yeah, this sums up the roster of the Raw. Let's just go quickly through the roster of the SmackDown if I didn't forget anything or not. So yeah, we didn't saw Sanity, we didn't saw Luke Harper and Rowan. I don't know where they are. We didn't saw the Usos, only on a tag team, on a mixed tag team challenge. I believe we saw something from Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, but it was kind of a weird vignette. Maybe? No, it was last week. No, don't remember. We didn't saw, unfortunately, Ty Dillinger and R-Truth, but again, this is the reason for it, because R-Truth right now busy with tagging with Carmella. R-Truth, by the way, is freaking crazy. He still thinks that he needs to pin Carmella. I don't know what's the problem. I love R-Truth and his comedy. It's freaking crazy and it's still funny. It's stupid, but it's still funny. And this is one of the things I like about R-Truth the most. I don't know. I don't believe that we saw Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville on SmackDown. No, don't remember. Definitely didn't saw Carlo or Primo and Carlito. I don't know where Shelton Benjamin is, probably injured. No Sin Cara, no Kane. Again, we talked about Eddie English. No Tamina, she probably injured. No Jeff Hardy at this point. I believe we saw Asuka and Naomi. Yep. We saw Carmella only on a mixed tag champion challenge. Yeah, we kind of talked about all roster in most cases. Exactly that. Styles, Charlotte, Shinsuke. Oh, by the way, Charlotte lost the title. Completely forgot to change the things. Okay, I'm going to change it later now. Yeah, New Day still holding the title. Still, we need to wait till AJ Styles is going to lose title and Shinsuke Nakamura is going to lose title for me in order to replace their photos, because right now their photos are with titles. Yeah, Top 5 Life at NXT we're going to talk about later. So yeah, this kind of sums up the thing about WWE. We have about 30 minutes till the end of the session and about 30 minutes till the end of this recording, approximately. So I guess let's just then, I'm going to talk about creative stuff while this video is happening. So basically, one of the things that, let's just talk about the reasons why I'm doing this, because again, it might not be clear, because again, it's clear for me, but it's not probably clear for you, for those who are watching, why I'm actually going with this anatomical build. Right now, for instance, I'm building the neck, and I actually got carried away. I wasn't planned on building a neck. But the thing about the human anatomy, it's freaking connected. There's no separate things. If you will start to build a face, the face will gradually go into the neck will gradually go into the other muscles of the body. Because of this, for me, it was pretty hard to stop and basically go with it. Mostly, one of the reasons why I started to work with the neck, because there is a big muscle that I'm trying to establish right here, that is basically going into the neck, and I thought, okay, I need to figure out the actual size of the neck and the proportions of the neck and their muscles before I will place this muscle, because this muscle getting placed on top of the other muscles. I'm not going to talk about the names of the muscles, although I could. I have the actual kind of thing that like has a lot of names with the muscles. I'm not going to do that because in most cases I'm not going to overload you with information about the muscles. In most cases, the only reason why you need to remember the muscles, if you will work with anatomy, to explain, to basically establish the difference between those muscles and their work, because usually naming things will definitely help us. But in most cases, like, if it's going to be probably more than enough if you will just visually remember where those muscles are going to be placed. So one of the reasons why I'm working, like what I'm doing right now, is basically I'm trying to work on, one of the reasons why I'm working on skeleton first, then on muscles, and only then we will actually going to think about the actual likeness and like we will actually start to make this character to look like CM Punk. Right now, I don't believe that this character looks like CM Punk, because again, right now I'm just establishing the basic things. The only thing that we have a proper placement for the eyes. We have a kind of a proper placement for the nose, proper placement for the ears, hopefully, but we'll check this out later. So we have basic proportions laid down, and in order to make CM Punk look like CM Punk, of course, we need to spend more time on it, and we're not going to be able to see CM Punk through this anatomy stage yet. We still need to progress to some type of an extent before this character will start to look like CM Punk. But still, the cool thing is that he's already looks like a pretty decent, actual, real person. Like, even without having any actual skin and by just having certain like separate muscles. I mean, this is, I believe, the benefits of the anatomy and understanding the anatomy. If you will understand anatomy and know how to basically sculpt it or draw it or paint it or whatever, it will basically make your human characters appear a little bit more realistic and a little bit more not necessarily realistic, but more believable, I would say, because the difference between realistic and believable is pretty big. Yeah. Realistic, it's something that basically looks close to the reality in terms of the visuals, but believable, it's a little bit different category, because you can create a realistic rendering but make it non-believable at all, and you can basically end up in an uncanny valley, which is the game concept, which basically we're not going to talk about today. Again, in order to not get to this uncanny valley thing when we're working with realistic forms, we need to build it on top of the realistic things. And we need to, I believe, consider anatomy. So what I'm doing right now is just basically extending the shape. I'm not trying to create any muscles. This is just like adding the clay on the bottom of the bust and making it basically like creating a shoulder area. You could do this multiple ways, and this is just my way of doing it. Again, I don't have that much of experience in sculpting, and I'm doing the things the way that for me is more intuitive. And the cool thing about sculpting, which is basically separates the things that I'm doing right now from creative on Twitch and creative on YouTube, the things that I'm doing right now on YouTube are basically involving the sculpting only and the complex anatomy and studying anatomy through the sculpting and form through the sculpting. What I'm doing right now on Twitch is I'm painting things. At least I will try to paint things starting from this weekend, hopefully, if I will manage to do that, and if I will manage to prepare things till that time. And the reason why I went into sculpting right away without that many preparations, because it's much more intuitive instrument to work with, like creative stuff. It's much more intuitive instrument to understand anatomy, because you work with three-dimensional form. One of the problems with anatomy when you're working with anatomy in 2D, because you need to learn how anatomy wraps around the form, and if you don't understand the form first, you're not going to understand how anatomy wraps around the form. For instance, this muscle, it actually wraps around the whole freaking neck. It starts somewhere there, it basically goes there and ends up closer to the clavicles. So, oh no, scapulars. No, this is the clavicle, there's the scapular. So again, because of this, we basically have this element of, I don't know, when we're working with sculpting, we have a 3D representation of something that we're studying. When it comes down to drawing and painting, the only thing that we have is the multiple references, our personal skills, and our understanding of this form, and we need to try to create an illusion of reality. When it comes down to sculpting, we're not creating an illusion of reality. When we're just working on visualization, we're working on something that already exists and trying to duplicate that or replicate that in our own way, using our basically observational skills, which is one of the things I believe that basically makes this thing pretty cool. For me personally, one of the reasons why I like this, why I love the sculpting a little bit, for me basically, not necessarily I love sculpting more, I still love painting and drawing, but again, because I'm not struggling with sculpting that much as I'm struggling with drawings and painting, for me sculpting is always kind of closer. Maybe because it's intuitiveness. I'm all about intuitive way of creating things, and if I don't feel like things are created intuitively, I don't feel like I have control over them. If I have some type of intuitive way of creating things, then I will be able to control them. And with sculpting, I actually able to control things. So if I need to change some type of part of the anatomy, I will be able to do that because I have 3 dimensions to do that. With 2D, you don't have that. You have a illusion of reality for 3 dimensions that you have to create on your own. And in order to control things the same way that you're controlling them in sculpting, is basically do more job that you're doing while doing sculpting. So in sculpting, again, as I said before, you just need to visualize. You just need to look at the reference and try to replicate this reference. But when it comes down to working with drawing and painting, you have to not only do the same thing, but since now you're working with an illusion of the 3D space and not the actual 3D space, you need to understand how to create an illusion of 3D space. So you have to be a pretty experienced artist already to do that. And in addition to that, you have to, of course, work with the actual complexity of the anatomy. So again, it just creates so many complexity when it comes down to that. Then for me personally, study anatomy through the 2D, and I actually started to study anatomy through 2D, not with 3D. It was freaking painful. Once I got into the sculpting, it was like, okay, now I have control. Now I actually able to control things that are happening in here. Yes, they're not perfect. Yes, I'm not like 100% like accurate on anatomy, because the problem of anatomy in general, it's kind of usually representative at some point, so it's not 100% true, because each book is going to portray anatomy in a different way, and since you're using like different resources to learn anatomy, and you're not necessarily working with the actual human body, and you're just working with the representation of how anatomy is simplified artistically or whatever, you don't necessarily have 100% like clear anatomy that actually exists. But still, as long as this anatomy will help you to build upon this anatomy, on top of this anatomy, than the actual real person, because most of these things are going to be smoothened, or basically, right now this is just the muscles. Once we will start to put skin on top, most of these muscles will disappear. We're not going to see them at all. By the way, one of the things that I definitely don't want to forget to do, and one of the reasons why I'm establishing right now all anatomy parts separately, because ideally we're going to remove most of them, but one of the reasons why I'm actually trying to establish those is to basically have some type of a under layer of the progression. So as I said before that we had a skull, and right now we actually partially like seeing the skull through the face, through the jaw. So this kind of a weird thing, it like this ghosty thing around the head is the actual skull, and we're working on a completely different mesh which basically works with anatomy. And before that, we, by the way, we duplicated an eye, we duplicated the nose, we duplicated the ears, we duplicated neck. We combined those elements with our muscles mesh, and because we understand that we're going to work with this mesh and connect all these pieces together. So when we're working with the skeleton, we need to keep them separate, because this is our first kind of pass. The second pass for us is this pass, once we will go into the actual anatomy. This is the reason why we're establishing all anatomy elements separately and actually trying to put them down and not create right away an actual face of the CM Punk, because I want to have something under the actual face to understand how these anatomy elements are going to influence the actual face once we will get back, like once we will get to the face. So again, these things are not 100% accurate. This is my first attempt of working with anatomy and sculpting this way. I really tried to sculpt anatomy, but it was based on a already existing mesh. I didn't sculpt it from the get-go, like from the ground up, from the beginning. This is the first time that I'm actually trying to sculpt anatomy in a like almost from nothing. We actually started the sculpt probably from a sphere, from a basic sphere, and we created all this thing by adding clay, and adding clay. Because of this, again, it's not going to be perfect. I'm still trying to kind of establish things the right way, and those things that are not going to look perfect, we will move. We will make them a little bit better later. So the more the more you practice this type of anatomy, and the more you observe it, the more you will notice things that you didn't notice before. So for instance, right now I kind of noticing some things, but I don't necessarily aware of everything and every muscle and every interaction between muscles. So because of this, I'm skipping a couple of muscles. I'm like basically simplifying some type of muscles and etc. I'm not 100% sure where exactly the clavicles are, because again, it's pretty like easy to draw clavicle, which I'm doing right now, and paint clavicle if you have the whole body. But when you don't have those, it's pretty hard to understand their relationship to the actual face, to the actual head. So again, you need to have a little bit more experience to know how to, without creating the whole body, create the actual size of the clavicles, because right now I definitely believe that they are too small. We definitely need to make shoulders bigger and etc. And this is something that we're going to work with, I guess, tomorrow. So again, there's a lot of stuff to work with, and since I'm still getting experience, this thing looks pretty bad. I mean, it definitely looks decent. It's probably better than nothing, and I still believe that this is a good progression. We're definitely going to work on a little bit more details once we will establish the basic mesh. So what I'm basically right now is doing, I'm trying to put all basic muscles and some portions of the fat in here. Then I will add the rest part of the fat and the second layer and the third layer, and we will start to work with the skin already. So it's going to do this, it's going to work the same way as we created this. So basically we're just going to, as we duplicated skeleton, and on top of the skeleton build this, the same thing we're going to do with this anatomy. Once we will finish this anatomy, we will establish all separate anatomy parts. Right now they're kind of a little bit blurred, but they're still appearing. We're going to establish them a little bit better. We will establish some type of a landmarks for us to follow when it comes down to going into the actual face. And once we will finish with that, we will be able to continue into the building the actual like final face, with anatomy of the skull, with anatomy of the muscles, of the facial features laid down under it, and on top of it we're going to build now the actual face of the steampunk. So which is definitely an interesting thing. I mean, it's definitely something that I believe we're going to keep as a pipeline for a long period of time, because again, I believe this is a way for you to study anatomy. Again, we don't, it's not necessary to create this thing like from the skull, then create this build of the muscles, and then on top of the muscles create an actual kind of face. You could again go with the low structural engineering dependency and use this low structural engineering dependency for the human face by just creating a basic, again, I will explain again what structural engineering dependency is in a minute. So again, low structural engineering dependency is when we are using a small amount of passes or not many passes when we go in from one pass to another. So for instance, if we would create this skeleton, or if we would create this portrait with low structural engineering dependency, we would probably just created a base mesh for a head without any indication of the skull, without any indication of muscles, without anything. Just a basic simplified primitive that basically shaped into something similar to the head. And then we would right away start to work on the details of the actual steampunk's face without even thinking about anatomy or whatever. So not establishing anatomy itself, but actually trying to right away like almost visualize from the photo that we're looking at right now. Instead of doing this, instead of using low structural engineering dependency, I believe that we need to approach, especially as not that experienced artists, we need to approach this with high structural engineering dependency and actually break down things by reverse engineering them. So we will reverse engineer CM Punk's face. We will try to come up, like, figure out how CM Punk's muscles are looking, how his skull is looking. Then we will recreate them in sculpting from the skull to the muscles to the actual face, and that way it basically is a high structural engineering dependency. So basically, we depended on a structural on the engineering structure of the subject that we're working with. So we're dependent on each layer of this structure. We're dependent on the skull. Because of the skull, we will be able to create a decent anatomy of the face. Because of this, we will be able to create a decent look that is going to look hopefully closer to the CM Punk. Again, I didn't experience it yet before. This is my first try of applying this type of methodology. Because of this, I don't believe if it actually will look good, but so far it actually looks pretty decent. Again, it's not perfect, but it still works. It still gives me the thing that it needs to give me. It gives me the practice element. It gives me the study element. I mean, I'm definitely studying anatomy. I'm remembering where the muscles are placed. I'm remembering how I'm sculpting them. I understanding better how these muscles are actually placed in the space. I understand and look now how these muscles are actually wrapped around the neck. Not just trying to imagine how they're doing this by doing with 2D media, but actually practicing in 3D media and allowing myself to study in a much more efficient way. So again, if you don't understand something in 2D, please use 3D simulators to understand how 3D space works. It's not that hard. I mean, we have Blender, free software that allows you to recreate almost everything that you want. Sculpting there too. So again, there is a possibility to study with efficiency, and I believe that the only way to study with efficiency is to study not just two-dimensional form or three-dimensional form and learn how to represent these three-dimensional form on 2D canvas, but actually study 3D form with actual 3D mediums like sculpting in reality or sculpting in digital, and learn anatomy that way. It will definitely help you to put a lot of information about anatomy in your mind. It will definitely strengthen your understanding of the anatomy, I believe, because it definitely strengthen my understanding of anatomy throughout the years. And again, I'm talking throughout the years, but again, I'm studying anatomy for a long time already. I started to study anatomy like briefly from probably 2012 or the end of 2012, something like this. But I studied only skeleton first. Then I kind of studied the actual anatomy, like with the muscles, but not fully, just like briefly. Then I completely stopped studying anatomy for like 3 years or so. Then I got back to the anatomy. So again, I'm on and off studying, but still, because I'm watching WWE, I'm constantly present around some type of anatomy elements. So we're watching WWE superstars. Usually they are kind of half naked, and because of this, it kind of allows us to study anatomy while like watching something that we like, especially what I like. Yeah. So, which is a good idea personally for me to watch wrestling. I'm watching wrestling not just for the stories, as I said before, but actually to constantly have this visual reference of how muscles are looking, how muscles are moving, how muscles are interacting. And one of the reasons why I'm putting this anatomy together, again, it's still not like super awesome, but again, it's pretty close to what the anatomy looks like. Considering the fact that we're looking with pretty low detailization, I mean, it's not necessarily low. We have in like 96, almost 100 active points. 1,000, 100,000. I don't know. I'm bad with numbers today. So yeah, 96.80, yeah, 884 basically, yeah, points, and it's not that big for the sculpt. I mean, for the beginning sculpt, it's pretty low, and considering the fact that we're working with low resolution, it already looks pretty decent for the low resolution. As I said before, the way to approach sculpting is approach it through the you need to put as much details as possible on as low resolutions as possible in order to basically then lose half of it and rebuild it on the top with more details. Because of this, you saw right from the beginning, we kind of built some muscles of the face, then we dynameshed, smoothed out everything, and because of this, we kind of lost a couple of details. If you don't want to smooth, I believe we could turn off this smooth element thing, and it's not going to smooth. I probably should do that. I completely forgot about this option. Again, once you will cut up with the process, you're not necessarily able to notice the things that you need to notice. So again, one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to basically make neck not necessarily super detailed, because again, neck is going to be distraction for us. Ideally, this portrait is going to be only a face. Neck is going to be added just as a additional element, not to make a head without a face, or head without a neck, because head without a neck looks weird. So because of this, we kind of will add some type of the suggestion of the neck. Again, I believe it looks pretty cool. I mean, I like how it looks. Again, as I said, it's not perfect, but again, our job is not to create perfect thing. Our job is to create a base on which it's going to be easy for us to build the actual Sandbox base. And the fact that we build it from the reverse engineered, hopefully close proximity to the actual Sandbox skull. Based on that, we created hopefully pretty close proximity to the actual anatomy of the Sandbox face, and it will allow us to focus more on super accurate tiny differences when we'll start to put the Sandbox face together, because most of the elements are already laid out, and with the anatomy and with the skull. So again, with high structural engineering dependency, you need to completely truly explain to yourself the benefits of this method. And again, the benefits of this method is the highest potential accuracy in the proportions with probably less experience, because you can create this without having that much of experience. I mean, you still need to understand anatomy. You still have to have anatomy in some experience in anatomy, of course, and understanding it. So but again, it all depends what are your skills are. I don't know how other people are sculpting. Yeah, for instance, throughout the years, I sculpted not that much. Man, my first sculpt was probably done in 2013 or something like this. It was completely random. I just tried ZBrush as a test. I didn't know what sculpting is, what it works, how it works. I just tried it, and I got some type of a decent weird expression of the face. It was not a human face, it was pretty stylized, and I kind of tried it, and okay, kind of cool. I guess I might sculpt something at someday. Then the next time that I got back to sculpting was probably 3 or 4 years later. Yeah, I kind of started to get into sculpting more since my first project that I decided to actually create in sculpting, and it was probably Let It Go, which is still ongoing project. I still didn't finish it, but still, no, I didn't use sculpting then. I worked on 3D then, but I didn't get to the sculpting stage. Yeah, I guess the next time that I got to the sculpting stage was a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago, and it was pretty interesting, because once I get to the stage, it was completely new to me, but it was so freaking intuitive that I was able even to sculpt some kind of a base, but weird, but something close to the anatomy. It was pretty bad still, because if I will compare this thing to the previous sculpt that I did with the suggested anatomy of the face, it's like completely different results. That sculpt, the old sculpt definitely looks worse, because I didn't establish any anatomy of the face at that point. It was built up like on top of the simple primitive, and because of this, again, I didn't necessarily thought about anatomy. This is my basically reason why I come up with this method of high structural engineering dependency. High structural engineering dependency basically allows us to make this transition from and working with the face better without having that much of experience, because again, if you don't have experience, you don't know how face is actually built. I mean, you will just try to draw or paint or sculpt the actual facial features. You're not going to look like what's under the face. You're not going to even ask those questions. You will just try to copy what you're seeing, and it's not an efficient way to learn. The only way to learn this way is just by repetitiveness. But again, I don't believe that, for me personally, repetitiveness and just repeating one thing all over and all over again is a good way to learn. And because of this, I kind of, okay, this is it. And because of this, I decided personally for myself that I'm going to learn a different way. I'm going to learn an efficient way. An efficient way for me is not just starting from basic primitive, which is low structural engineering dependency, and then create from this basic primitive an actual face, which only experienced artists are capable to do so, because again, they have experience, they already know how face works. They don't need to ask themselves questions, what's under the face. For them, it's more than enough with basic primitive. For the beginner and for not that experienced artist, we need something that will help us to build this structure from the ground up. So because of this, I'm using first base for the skull, as we did. We created it from the basic sphere, so we have to start somewhere. And again, learning the skull would be a good thing to do that. And skull is actually not that complex, although I believe this is one of the most complex forms of human anatomy, because again, it's shaped so differently. It's so many weird transitions that you need to figure out. But again, the only way to figure out them is through the practice. And what we did right from the beginning is we actually tried to go through this actual practice. So apparently we're not going to do that much today. Again, like till the end of the session, it's like 5 or like maybe 10 minutes left. I don't believe that I will be able to do that much in 10 minutes. I could just talk about like the things that I like about the sculpt and the things that I don't like about the sculpt. So again, we still didn't try to make this sculpt close to the CM Punk. It still doesn't look like CM Punk at all. Again, you might see some like similarities to the CM Punk. I don't know. I don't see it, because again, it's pretty hard to see similarities to person when we're dealing with something that doesn't look like a person. Because again, if we're going to look at our like basic thing with the anatomy, it definitely doesn't look like CM Punk. I mean, even if we're going to switch to this, the only thing that looks like CM Punk is the eyes, not necessarily the shape of the eyes, but the actual placement of the eyes. I believe it's right. We definitely need to work on the nose. We definitely need to make it smaller, a bridge of the nose a little bit smaller. Also, CM Punk has a pretty like bent, like basically broken nose in here, and we need to add asymmetry. Asymmetry is a big part of the human likeness. So right now, one of the reasons why this kind of sculpture doesn't look like CM Punk is because CM Punk, it doesn't have a completely symmetric face. He has a pretty asymmetric face, and once we will add these elements of asymmetry, he starts to look more and more like CM Punk. So even if we're going to go into the next stage, which hopefully we will cover tomorrow, because hopefully I will have for at least like the whole day tomorrow to do that. Not the whole day, but at least half of the day to also definitely, and half of it we of course is going to cover on the actual stream, because again, right now I actually don't have any problems with going into the next stages. For me, the most complex stage and the most unanswerable in terms of the how you will approach it was this stage. How to get from the skeleton to the anatomy. I didn't know how to actually make this transition. Because I wanted to make this transition based on the facial reconstruction methods, by putting some type of markers, then figuring out like the depth of those markers, and then using those markers or landmarks to basically build a skull on top, or anatomy on top of it. But in the end, it's too complex to control. It's still not going to produce the proper results, and it's better to just deal with it on like by eye, by understanding that, for instance, in this area we definitely need to add more kind of depth than anyone else. The biggest depth probably in cheeks, because again, skull doesn't have any cheeks at all. There's an emptiness in here. A couple of a little bit more depths getting added once we will start to build the branches of the face, of the anatomy of the mouth. Once those branches will start to connect with the, I forgot this bone. Again, I don't remember names. I studied them at some point, but I forgot most of them. So again, we still need to add some depth, or like right now it's too deep. We definitely need to make this eye less like there, because it's too deep. We need to definitely bring it a little bit closer. But again, the cool thing is that we actually have control. So if these eyes doesn't look right, we will be able to bring them, like pull them out of the shape. We're still able to do that. We also, the cool thing is that we also have all elements that was established before, and it will allow us to that will basically play as those type of landmarks that I talked about. So instead of having a actual markers that will allow us to establish the depth, we will work with the depth by eye and basically comparing this depth. So for instance, right now, if we're going to look from the side, we know that okay, we seeing like the ghost of the skull, and the ghost of the skull appears pretty like it has a little bit depth there. But I believe like we might even push this further. There is a possibility that we don't have enough space in here. We actually need to push this further. The same goes for almost every part. Again, there's a lot of work still needs to be done, and this project is probably going to be created for a long time. Again, probably the first 10 streams. So this is our 5th stream. There's going to be a 6th tomorrow. I believe at least like first 10 streams I'm probably going to deal with CM Punk only. Unfortunately, yes, because like ideally I planned to create one sculpture during the week, so that means that each week we could basically switch the sculptures. But again, since I don't have that much of experience yet, I need to build this experience, I need to gain this experience, I need to get used to the process, clearly understand what I'm doing, get used to working with anatomy, know where to put certain muscles, build up some type of visual memory, build up some type of muscle memory, how to work with those things, and in the end we will become a little bit faster in terms of how fast we're going to go through those sculptures. But again, for now, unfortunately, it's going to be super slow, and not everyone is going to be interested in looking like me working on throughout the month on one freaking sculpture. Usually people want a quick results, and me working on this for a month or more even not going to be an interesting thing to watch. So for most of the people, because of this, I believe we actually going to kind of still focus on this. I'm still getting used to talking about WWE. I'm still getting used to the whole process, like creative process in sculpting. Again, this is the first time that I'm using my concept of structural engineering dependency, and this is the highest structural engineering dependency possible in a human face, when we're starting with the skull base, building up the skull, like a relatively realistic skull, then on top of the skull building muscles, and only on top of the muscles adding fat and skin, and trying to add an actual facial features of the person that we're studying. This way, I believe we're going to achieve, again, as I said before, the best quality with less experience, because again, that way we're not going to rely on just our skills and our memory and our visual kind of perception. If we we could rely on building something from this type of primitive and right away going into the face, skipping anatomy, skipping skull, skipping everything, but instead actually creating some type of a building blocks, basically, because every building is not going to be built right away from a freaking fundament. I don't know how to properly put a thing on it. Fundament. So even if you're going to build a building, there needs to be a fundamental stuff. On top of the fundamental, we are creating some type of a holding structure of the fundamentals that we will, on top of those fundamentals, we will put something better, and the whole building. And it's not possible when we're working with low structural engineering dependency, because there's no fundamentals on on the bottom. We just have a basic primitive, and we are completely, it's like a building, I don't know, cartoon house without a without the fundament, or I don't know how to probably put a claim thing on it, whatever. So yeah, today I'm super tired. I wasn't slept for a couple of days normally and properly, or probably for a week, even more, I don't know. Right now I'm finally getting back to the normal regime of sleep, and because of this we need to finish right now. So let's just go into our closing thoughts. And yeah, so again, structural engineering dependency is a pretty awesome concept personally for me, and hopefully it will open your personal eyes on how to deal with those things. Again, without starting to without simplifying things, you need to go and basically make them too complex, and only by complexity you will be able to deal with lack of experience, which seems kind of weird. I don't know, maybe for me it's clear and understandable because I have some experience in anatomy, maybe, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about that. But again, unless you will try it, you will know it. I definitely encourage you to try this method. Try to start with a simple base, then create a basic skull on top of this base, then duplicate a skull, make on top of the skull the anatomy, and you will probably figure out that it's much easier to deal with the anatomy by not having any experience, or that much of experience. Yes, you will probably not going to produce super mega realistic results right away if you don't have any experience in anatomy, because you will still struggle with form, with space, and etc. But again, give it a try. You might basically imagine yourself, I don't know how to properly say it, amaze yourself. I mean, you could actually end up with pretty decent results that could inspire you to pursue this thing, continue to pursue this technique, because I believe this is pretty interesting technique. Again, high structural engineering dependency works only for faces, I believe. We don't need to work with high structural engineering dependency for the body, because for the body, again, right now, as I showed with the neck, we didn't actually created the vertebrae, we didn't created the actual neck, we just built a primitive, and on top of this primitive we built an anatomy. This is called a middle structure engineering dependency, where not high, but actually it's somewhere in the middle. So we still built creating some type of fundamentals on the bottom, and then we're building the actual structure. So maybe the fundamentals themselves are not the actual skeleton, but we still working with the real anatomy, and we still know how it connects to certain parts. So for instance, we know that this muscle connects to this skull bone, and it's basically our main thing. We also know that these muscles are actually created to the certain skull bone, and it kind of a middle point between structural engineering dependency, between high structural engineering dependency and low structural engineering dependency, which is, again, I don't believe this is a good way. The good example of creating a, like, working with low structural engineering dependency was probably an ear and the nose, when we basically got two basic primitives, and out of those two basic primitives we created an ear and the nose. It's much harder, you need to spend more time on it, and you actually need to have a little bit more experience with it, but it's actually possible to do that too. Again, we created a pretty decent ear by using a low structural engineering dependency. We created a pretty decent nose with low structural engineering dependency. We created a pretty decent neck with a mid structural engineering dependency, and we created a pretty decent face with a high structural engineering dependency, by again starting from the skull and building up. Again, it's still not the end, of course. Yeah, it's pretty far from the actual face. And I still don't know if it actually going to look like CM Punk. Hopefully it will, because I believe that this method actually works, because I like the results already, and if I like the middle result, I'm 100% sure that the end result is going to look good, because we're definitely not going to make things worse. How you could possibly do that, because we have all elements of control. We have the building blocks, we have a skeleton, we're not removing the skeleton. We are going to have the actual muscles, we're not going to remove them. So because of these two building blocks that are going to be underlying structure of the face, we're still going to be able to use them to not mess them up. Yeah, so we're not going to delete them, and it's awesome. I believe this is actually pretty cool stuff. So yeah, I guess that's it for today. On that note, we're going to finish the session. Yeah, I guess, thank you for watching, thank you for being here, have a nice day or night, and we're going to see you in the next session, which is again going to be tomorrow, where we continue to work on CM Punk, and we will talk about the rest of the stuff about WWE, if I will manage to watch them, hopefully. So that's kind of it. See you tomorrow. Bye.